Wow, that's a tremendous looking trophy.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Platinum Explosion, number one PlayStation podcast in the Oceanias. My name is Dylan Blight, and I'm joining you today for a special bonus episode to break down the PS5 official reveal. So last night at about midnight-ish Australian time, Wired put up another article. Of course, Wired revealed the PS5, or as the time we didn't know that it was going to be officially called the PS5. They revealed the next-gen PlayStation console. They got the scoop on that, and it seems that PlayStation have redeemed that original article good enough, and they've returned to them to get more of a scoop to all of us out here on the PlayStation's details. I know some people are finding the way they're releasing this information weird and odd, and they kind of want it done in state of plays or these massive events. But honestly, the way they're kind of trickling out this information, most of it's nothing that's going to get your average consumer hyped. It's not going to play well in a state of play. These sorts of videos would be boring. These are the sorts of details, what we're going to talk about in a minute. These are the sorts of details that at the PS4 reveal event where Mark Cerny came out on stage and he talked about all the high technical stuff that I saw everyone on Twitter saying how boring it was and blah, 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 just show us the games. So as much as everyone's kind of complaining at the moment, I don't think they will be, because when they eventually reveal the PS5 event, whatever it is, where they show it off officially to the public and let us see some games, NAC 3 obviously will be there, then we won't have to go over all this stuff as in depth. I'm sure they'll give dot points, be like ray tracing, 4K, 8K. So they'll say all the tick words, but you won't have Mark Cerny out there boring everyone for 20 minutes because they're getting these details out over time. So I'm going to go over the key aspects of the Wired article, and we'll start with the sort of big one, of course, which is the name is officially called the PS5. Everyone acts like this isn't massive news, but at the same time, it's like they've got to confirm it one way or another. They can confirm it in an event. They confirm it now. Either way, they're going to confirm the name eventually. You could all assume that the Xbox. We didn't know what the Xbox was going to be called. Rumors go around it's going to be called the Xbox One. It gets confirmed. Oh, it's Xbox One. Okay, cool. Rumors, of course, we all assume it's going to be called the PS5. They confirm it's the PS5. I don't know why they don't just come out and say it straight away. I guess maybe every generation they're like, well, maybe we'll change the name, but they decide not to. Yeah, so it's called the PlayStation 5. It is coming holiday 2020. That is not really a term, I guess, that we use much here in Australia. I don't know anyone that's like, coming this holiday season. It's very like movie trailer explanation of things, coming this holiday season. So holiday season in America, from my Googling or whatever, everyone keeps saying it's like Thanksgiving to like early January-ish, at least through to the end of the year sort of thing. Thanksgiving is like end of November. So if they're saying holiday period-ish, let's just say November through to, let's just say it's either coming out November or December. Boil it down that way. And presumably then it's going to come out end of November if Thanksgiving is end of November-ish. Although they could just put it out the 18th or something, it just really depends what else is falling on these dates, I guess. I don't know. But at this stage, assume it's coming out late November. So you have basically a year. We're in October now, so you start saving your pennies. Let's go on to some more of the minor details here. So ray tracing, of course, which we knew was confirmed and talked about, but everyone was kind of confused if it was going to be software-based or how it was going to work and what the details was exactly with the ray tracing. I'm not going to spend ages on this little bonus episode going over the whole ray tracing thing again. Ray tracing, honestly, if you want a really good example and explanation of what ray tracing is, go look up what Control looks like with ray tracing enabled on PC. And that game is stunning with ray tracing enabled. It's not like, oh, we're going from 4K to 8K, all these things. That's resolutions. Everyone gets hyped about resolutions. I think people can understand resolutions a lot easier, Oh, we go from a 1080p picture to a fucking 20 million p picture, and now we're at fucking 4K TVs, and I walk into my local Harvey Norman, they got 8K TVs, Resolution I feel like is easy to understand. The biggest technology when it comes to current TVs, though, is HDR. HDR is what makes 4K, like 4K, fine. HDR is amazing. And it's the number one. If I had to pick between 4K and HDR, I would be picking HDR any day of the week. And ray tracing is a really exciting upgrade in our visual fidelity and like lots of small features that we can do that make such big differences. So I'm super excited for this. But they've confirmed that it's going to be GPU based, which basically means that AMD, who currently, as of recording or today, they haven't confirmed or that they have any GPUs coming out yet with ray tracing in them. Of course, all the current GPUs with ray tracing are NVIDIA ones. So I guess this is also kind of confirmation for PC people that you can expect ray tracing enabled AMD GPUs by in the Navi line, I guess, towards at least mid to the end of next year, I guess. So that's cool. Next big thing for me personally, I know this isn't something that's going to super excite everyone, but it's confirmed that we'll still have a Blu-ray player, and we'll talk about the PS5 disc in a minute, but it's also going to be able to play 4K Blu-ray movie TV discs. So all my collection of 4K movies and TV shows, which was the reason I brought my Xbox One initially, was to play those, will now be able to be played in the PS5. Of course, then there's questions about that, like what sort of formats does it support? Does it support Dolby Atmos? You know, like we're going to have a million questions towards if the PS5 is a good 4K movie player purchase, or maybe when the Xbox Scarlet comes around, could be a better movie player purchase. Well, that's kind of something that a lot of people look at. That's its own thing. But either way, it's going to be able to play your discs, which is, of course, important, because that's one thing that I thought was really stupid about the PS4 Pro. It did not play your movie discs. Game installations will be mandatory. So your disc is now basically a package to deliver the install to your console. You're going to be buying a disc from EB Games, JB Hi-Fi, whatever isn't shut down by the time the PS5 releases end of next year, and your game is going to have to fully install on the SSD, and this is because the SSD and the way the games are going to be developed for the PS5 is completely different to how games are being developed to run off HDDs. And anyone developing for the PlayStation 5 is going to be able to develop in mind, knowing that they're going to be able to do heaps of different things with the SSD. And this isn't just down to load times. This will come down to, and they talk about it in an article and give really good examples of stuff, like sometimes developers kind of have to put the same objects 400 times through in different loops and whatever else on, so it's easier for it to cycle through and find information faster when you're playing the game. The SSD won't have that problem, so there's going to be less data, and they can then have more data to do other things with, bigger worlds, better graphics, I guess, whatever excites you. I don't know, it's really going to be interesting to see what people can do with this sort of stuff, I guess. But that, yeah, it does basically mean that your discs are kind of like when you go buy a PC game these days, and it's like, here's your box, here's your case, and inside's just like a code. So now you're buying a disc and you're going to put it in, and it's just going to install the game anyway. There's no two buts about it, you know. You got to install it, because it won't be able to read the disc at the rate that it'll be able to read off the SSD. That's the main thing here. PlayStation cannot read your disk drive, 100 gigabyte Blu-ray 4K disk drive. It cannot read those discs at the rate it can read the SSD. So it needs to install all of the data to get that stuff done. So that's cool. Sony in a quote said, rather than treating games like a big block of data, we're allowing finer-grained access to data that can mean the ability to just install a game's multiplayer campaign, leaving the single-player campaign for another time, or just installing the whole thing and then deleting the single-player campaign once you've finished it. So that is very cool, obviously, as well. It means that people who only want to play Call of Duty multiplayer only have to install the multiplayer. People who only want to play single-player, install the single-player. If you want to play both, you can install both the Call of Duty single-player and multiplayer, and then to save space later, because we know no matter how big these SSDs are, which they haven't confirmed how big they are yet, obviously. I presume they'll come when they officially reveal it. They'll be like, oh, there's a 1 terabyte model, there's a fucking whatever model. Either way, you're going to run out of space eventually with SSDs. And you're going to want to be able to delete stuff. And it's going to be cool that you can be like, well, I've finished the single player campaign of Call of Duty Black Ops 64. Let's just delete the single player and I'll keep it on for the multiplayer, or vice versa, or whatever. So you're going to be able to break up the install files and what you leave installed on your console. Once again, PlayStation 5, all these sorts of features, sounding a lot more PC-ish, like they're able to have a lot more control over sort of what you're installing and what you're able to do there. So it's cool. The PS5 will get a much improved UI. Quote from Cerny once again, even though it'll be fairly fast to boot games, we don't want the player to have to boot the game, see what's up, boot the game, and see what's up. I think the article just duplicated, but nonetheless, we'll move on. Multiplayer game servers will provide the console with the set of joinable activities in real time. Single player games will provide information like what missions you could do and what rewards you might receive for completing them. All of these choices will be visible in the UI. As a player, you just jump right into whatever you like. So the UI on the PS4, I think we can all kind of agree it's not super exciting. It does the job. I don't mind it really. Click on the thing, get the game done, do whatever you need to do. The big difference between the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One is I kind of like a lot of stuff that Xbox tries to do, but it just makes the console run so slow that I hate it. So I feel like I kind of just want a best of both worlds. I want some of the more fancy, nifty features that like the Xbox One is trying to do and Xbox is trying to do over there with their consoles, but I don't want it to run so damn slow because one thing, my PS4 boots up so much faster than my Xbox. I can get into games so much faster. But the UI is cool. Things popping up. It basically sounds like they're going to expand the what's new section of your PlayStation 4 console. I don't know if anyone actually scrolls through that. I'm one of those people that do sometimes because, of course, I'm like, what trophies have people been getting? What games have they been playing? What's going on over here? But I basically just scroll through it as like a newsfeed thing. I never like people's stuff or comment on people's stuff because I always thought they were silly. I'm like, who's going to stop here? Click comment and like spend 10 minutes writing very dickily unless you hook up your phone to use it as an app so you could type stuff. But I'm like, no, I don't see anyone using all that stuff. So it basically sounds like they're going to expand the like what's news thing and like what your friends are doing. And that's kind of just going to be your PlayStation UI now. Like, oh, there's a multiplayer event happening in Call of Duty, but you don't have to have the disc in for it to tell you that. It'll just pop up. Like, you've got the game installed. Here you go. There's an event happening. You've got Battlefront 3 installed. There's a double XP multiplayer event happening this weekend. They've kind of got a lot of these things spread out across the PS4 at the moment, and it just doesn't integrate well, and it sounds like what they're trying to do is just expand it and make it run a lot better. So I'm hoping, expand on freaking trophy stuff as well. Like, I want to be able to boot up and, it would be cool if it kind of tries to incentivize you a bit more. And I hope they build in some sorts of reward program for trophies. That would be cool. And even if they're not going to do a rewards program, at least do what the Xbox does once again, which is if you leave your Xbox idle, it'll pop up and be like, hey, you're really close to this achievement. Like, you've got 9 out of 10 kills with this weapon in this game before you can unlock this achievement. So these sorts of menus spread out closer, I'd love that in the PS5. Be like, hey, you're really close to this trophy. You're really close to this platinum. You need to go get it. Go grab the platinum. Peter Rubin, the writer of this article, then spots, when he's handed a controller, he spots what he assumes is a mic on this new DualShock. It hasn't been officially titled the DualShock 5 yet, but for the sake of this episode, we are going to be referring to it as the DualShock, of course. Mark Cerny, though, notes that he isn't willing to talk about whatever that Peter Rubin may have spotted that may or may not look like a microphone, but we'll note that, of course, about a month ago, I think it was, there was a patent that came through that Sony was like looking into voice-assisted stuff, so they were filing that, and then this could be that sort of thing. So we may get to a stage where, like, instead of having to have your PlayStation camera plugged in, which you can now, and you can say, hey, PlayStation, start game, or, all this sort of random shit. It's not full-on, like, Siri or Connect level stuff the PlayStation has when you have the camera plugged in and whatever else, but you can be like, hey, PlayStation, start the game. So I guess they're going to upgrade the microphone that's in the DualShock 5, and then you'll be able to do these sorts of things. I guess people like Hideo Kojima could do some fucking wacky ass shit with that plugged into the controller as well. But the things I do talk about with the controller are quite interesting. So saying here, Peter writes, one is adaptive triggers. They can offer varying levels of resistance to make shooting a bow and arrow feel like the real thing, the tension increasing as you pull the arrow back, or make a machine gun feel far different from a shotgun. It also boasts haptic feedback, far more capable than the rumble motor console gamers are used to, with highly programmable voice call actuators? That's what we're going to go with. Located in the left and right grips of the controller. So we'll kind of start with the the triggers, I guess. The upgrade on triggers is probably going to make a lot of people happy. I know a lot of people will be wanting to hear if the DualShock 5 is going to be able to have like changeable or upgradable or better kind of pads. You know, a lot of people want the Xbox One Pro controller as kind of like the set standard for controllers, and maybe I don't think that's what's going to happen here. Maybe PlayStation will look into doing something like that, but then at the same time, I feel like if they do, they'll be like it's its own thing because it's like so much more expensive, I guess, you know, all the modulars and whatever else, and then they could sell it as a separate controller for people who are after the Pro DualShock 4. So I could see it being a thing, but that's not kind of what we're going to be getting here. The triggers, though, are basically, it's just growing technology. I don't know if anyone remembers, how bad the PS3 trigger, well, they weren't even triggers, how bad the PS3 R2 L2 buttons were. They were absolute dog shit. I remember the first time I played with my DualShock 4 controller, DualShock 3, sorry, this is going to be DualShock 4. I'm over here playing with the PlayStation 4 for the first time, playing whatever game, and you know, you boot up into a game that uses a car, and you're like, oh, suddenly there's levels of force for this. Not what they're talking about here, but even with that controller, it was like, okay, so I can push in a little bit, the car will, you know, go at a normal pace, and then if I can pull the trigger all the way in, and I'll go absolutely ham. And then obviously the triggers on the current DualShock also made it a lot better for shooting games anyway, because it actually felt like triggers. So this is an upgrade of that once again, where the difference between holding it down with a machine gun is just going to be like very loose, I guess, and like blowing it off, and then I guess firing something like a shotgun, they'll presumably feel a lot tighter and harder. Bow and arrow, I guess it'll be, as you're pulling down the trigger, you'd feel the tension in it, and then, you know, you let go and off it goes. The haptic feedback stuff is basically, well, they talk about it a bit more here. So firstly, Peter says, I play for a series of short demos courtesy of the Japan studio team that designed the PSVR's Astrobot rescue mission. In the most impressive, I ran a character through a platform level that featuring a number of different surfaces, all of which gave distinct and surprisingly immersive tactile experiences. Sand felt slow and soggy. Mud felt slow and soggy. On ice, a high-frequency response made the thumbsticks really feel like my character was gliding. Jumping into a pool, I got a sense of resistance of the water. On a wooden bridge, a bouncy sensation. When I first read this last night, at whatever wacky time it posted, I thought I was kind of just skimming through it to get all the details, and I thought that was actually talking about having the analog sticks on the DualShock kind of have built-in, you know, adaptive stuff like the triggers was, but it's not that. So it's basically the easiest explanation of this is it's HD rumble from the Switch, but I guess better. I would assume that it's hopefully better. You know, don't put out the Switch is several years old now. It'd be quite weird if it wasn't so much better. But they're using this high frequency responses and whatever else spread it throughout the entire thing on the full back of the DualShock. It makes it sound like, so it's not like the Switch has like a couple different points of vibration. This makes it, and I'm trying to boil it down. So the Switch's Joy-Cons, which have HD rumble in them, have like several points of basically vibration that they can use. When they first revealed it, they did the whole demo of like, oh, you're going to be able to feel different ice cubes in there. And it's because, and they showed the 3 ice cubes or whatever. It's basically because there's like 3 different points of vibration happening in there. I think that's the easiest way to boil that down. This makes it sound like they're not having like 3 separate points. They got like one long line of something in there, and then you can tailor that to where the frequency response is going. So that sounds like it's obviously going to be a lot more open to doing lots of different effects and whatever else. So that, as in the examples given here, I don't know exactly how holding a controller feels slow and sloggy when you're going through sand. I guess it's one of those things you'd have to feel to fully understand. Either way, it does sound quite interesting. I'm a fan of HD rumble from what I've used of it, because this is of course the only example we have for this sort of thing is the Switch and HD rumble. The problem with the Switch and HD rumble is it's a feature that they added that they barely use and barely anyone actually touches, because most people, you know, they're playing the Switches docked with the Pro controllers, they're playing them handheld, and it doesn't use HD rumble at that time. Like, it's just a feature that a lot of people aren't going to even touch or see or whatever, as impressive and cool as the tech is, I guess. But with the PlayStation 5, of course, everyone's going to be playing with the same controller. And then if it's adapted into most games in different ways and whatever else, it's something that more people are going to notice, obviously, with the PS5 compared to the Switch, I think, because people are just going to be experiencing it no matter what. They don't have to pick up 1-2 Switch and play the mini games with the Joy-Cons to be able to understand what the sensation is. Another example that's given here, Peter continues in the article, says, Peter then plays through Gran Turismo Sport on a dev kit, right? So this is the thing. He plays through on a dev kit, and he notes in the article that the dev kit that he's looking at looks a lot like the one that has been doing the rounds lately, which looks like an absolute nonsense machine, really. But presumably, I would presume the following, which is that it doesn't look anything like that. It looks something like that, like shape-wise, sure, and design-wise, but the one that's going around the internet at the moment is obviously an artist's interpretation of, like basically a blueprint, and they've filled in the dot points. So it's not going to look exactly like that. But either way, it's interesting that he notes that is the one that has been kind of leaked and going around is apparently the one he was playing on over here. So Peter then plays Gran Turismo Sport on that dev kit. And he says, driving on the border between the track and the dirt, I could feel both surfaces. Doing the same thing on the same track using a DualShock 4 on the PS4, that sensation disappeared entirely. It wasn't that the old style rumble feedback paled in comparison, it was that there was no feedback at all. User tests found that rumble feedback was too tiring to use continuously, so they released a version of GT Sport that simply didn't use it. So it's quite interesting to note that if you're like, well, surely all this vibration and shit that's happening could get annoying and tedious. I guess they're kind of committed to this stage that it won't be, because they're saying that they originally had high level of rumble in your DualShock controller on your PS4 for when your car's kind of got 2 wheels in the dirt and 2 wheels on the road, and it's a bit of the you're bumping along, and they removed it, I guess, because they thought it would be too annoying for players to continuously put up with. But the sensation that he's talking about here with the new controller, it sounds like they're like, it's just more natural and it's not going to annoy you, kind of just adds to the immersion and the experience, I guess. Once again, all of this is just something where it's like, oh, I'd love to have a go myself and fully be able to understand and be able to talk about it, because it's a lot of reading the article and be like, oh, it sounds like that, but what's it actually feel like? I wish I could explain in my own words, but either way, I think it sounds really cool. And then the other thing here is like they flicking through the article, the couple games they mention here is obviously PSVR's team, the Japan studio that worked on Astrobot. Does that mean that they're suddenly confirmed that there's going to be a bunch of mini games releasing from them day one on the PS5? No, what they're working on, what they made simply could be for dev reasons and whatever else. Yes, they could release a demo day one of the PS5. It doesn't mean it's confirmed as the exact same thing. They've brought over Gran Turismo Sport here so they can show off the haptic feedback features. They deemed it a good way to show off the haptic feedback features of the controller. That does not mean that is confirmed that GT Sport will be releasing on the PlayStation 5. Okay. So next thing they did note is that adaptive feedback could have been included in the PlayStation Pro's launch, but they chose not to, as to not alienate customers. So for all the complaining that people did at the time of, oh, it's going to split the player base and all this sort of stuff, they really could have split the player base if there was a completely different experience that you could have been getting playing with a completely different controller. So I'm glad they didn't do that. I'm happy with the Pro launch. I'm happy for them to continue doing that with the PS5. I'm happy for a PS5 Pro to come down, 4 or 5 years after launch or whatever. I feel like that's kind of just what we have to do these days. And as long as it's just kind of a slight upgrade to make things run smoother, better, whatever, cool, don't have a problem. The controller also used USB Type-C for charging as well as direct connection to turn it into a wired controller. So USB-C, very cool, very good. I'm hoping that will mean we get fast charging. If we get fast charging with the controllers, I think that's a huge thing that people won't appreciate, but it'll also just be one of those things that they're doing but not kind of being thankful enough for, I guess. Like, imagine in a world where you can charge your controller from flat, like in under half an hour, and then it's going to last a lot longer, because they said the battery in it is bigger as well. So imagine if you could quick charge your USB-C PlayStation controller, that would be very cool. I hope that's the road we're going here. The other thing I've noticed that it turns it into a wide controller. So the big difference that they're saying here is that you're not plugging it into something, you're not plugging it into your PlayStation and it's charging while you're playing it. That's different to it turning into a wide controller. So basically plugging in by the USB-C to your PlayStation 5, turning it into a wide controller, you're then going to have zero latency, and this is important for people who want zero latency with fighting games and whatever else. Whatever you want zero latency for, you're going to be able to turn your controller into a fully wired controller. Not something I'll use, but it's nice that it's there, I guess. And apparently it weighs a bit more than the current DualShock, which doesn't weigh that much, but it also weighs less than Xbox One's current controller. So the Xbox One controller is definitely the heaviest controller that I own. Not to the point that it's like cumbersome or annoying or whatever. So if this fits somewhere between those two controllers, I think that's perfectly fine. I've got nothing to complain about there. Then there's a couple extra notes here. The article kind of just finished up with, I don't know where these people came from. If they were sitting in the room where Peter was conducting this interview with Mike Cerny the entire time, whatever. But then there's a quote chucked in from Marco Frush, who's the president of Blue Point Games, of course, who has been doing a lot of these ports, including the most recent remake of Shadow of the Colossus, who said, "We're working on a big one right now, and I'll let you figure out the rest." So that's all I said. So if you want a confirmation of a PS5 game that's coming, apparently whatever Blue Point's working on is a PS5 game. Now, we've known that Blue Point is working on something for quite some time. They've been teasing it. They've been saying it's bigger than anything they've worked on before. They worked on the Shadow of the Colossus remake. We all thought that was pretty fucking big. If they're working on something that's bigger than that we kind of presumed was going to be a PS4 game for a lot of time, because they started talking about this years ago, I guess they've been working on this game for years at this point. Or at least were working on it for PS4 and then moved on to working on it for PS5. So that's quite interesting. Obviously not much to go on there, but I'm like, okay, Blue Point, launch game potentially? Well, we'll see. And another person of here who was talking was Laura Meal, who's the chief studio officer for EA. So we now can kind of presume that EA is going to have a close partnership with PlayStation coming into the next generation, I guess, if they're involved in these rooms and interviews and talkies or whatever else. But she says, I could be really specific and talk about experimenting with ambient occlusion techniques or the examination of ray tracing shadows. More generally, we're seeing the GPU be able to power machine learning for all sorts of really interesting advancements in the gameplay and other tools. Above all else, Peter writes, Mule adds, it's the speed of everything that will define the next crop of consoles. She said, quote, we're stepping into a generation of immediacy. In mobile games, we expect a game to download in moments and to be just a few taps from jumping right in. Now we're able to tackle that in a big way. So I guess that's something that a lot of people probably don't think about, but is important, especially in the day and age where we've got Apple Arcade and whatever else, and all of those games download in hot 2 seconds to your phone, to your iPad, to your Apple TV, to your Mac, whatever. They're not massive games, and it's a service you jump into or whatever else. But even then, it's like you can download some of these games onto your iPad or your phone in a couple seconds, and you can sync your freaking DualShock up to it, and you can be playing a game, and away you go. PS4 game, I had to download something of note. What did I download freaking Last of Us, obviously a week ago. Download Last of Us Remastered. That wasn't quick. Jump in, wait for a download, took freaking an hour, whatever. Jump in, try and play multiplayer. Oh, you got to download 500 megabytes more for and everything. It's just a lot of waiting and time. And it's like, just trying to play it. So if you don't have the speed, obviously download stuff. That's not really going to help at all here, because stuff is going to still take ages to download. But if we're going to be able to press X on a game and kind of just jump into it within 2 seconds and not be waiting 10 minutes or more, like you hang on the GTA 5 boot up screen or whatever you've got, these massive games that take ages to boot up. It's quite interesting. And of course, I think the biggest thing of note there is that EA is seemingly partnering up with Sony for the next generation. So take that to the bank and think of it what you will, I guess. And that'll do it. So that is the PS5's official reveal. Well, the PS5 official name reveal. It's coming holiday 2020. And of course, you can expect many more breakdowns of all the news and things about the PS5 heading into its launch next year, right here on explosionnetwork.com and on Platinum Explosion. So tell your friends, share it around, tell them to subscribe. Number one PlayStation podcast in the Oceanias. All the details will be right here. Thank you for joining me this week. Don't forget to follow at Explosion Pod on Twitter, at Plat Podcast, at Vivaladil, Vivaladil, and we'll be at PAX this weekend in just a couple days. So head on over to explosionnetwork.com/PAX for all of our stuff that's coming out of PAX as well. And thank you for joining me on this special bonus episode of Platinum Explosion.